It's time for Around the Ozarks Sports Scene, brought to you by Thompson Sales and the Pitch Pizza and Pub. Here's your host, Scott Puryear.
Welcome in to another edition of Around the Ozarks Sports Scene. I am Scott Puryear. As always, big thank you to you for tuning in this week and listening or watching, whatever your preference is. A big thank you to our sponsors, the Pitch Pizza and Pub and Thompson Sales. We'll talk more about those at the end of the program today, but it's a very special one for me because my guest is a guy that I have admired literally since he came to town and I was in town. He left town. I was here. He came back his entire career. And our pleasure to have on today, Mr. Art Hains. Art, thanks for joining me.
That's Scott. My honor to be on with you.
Well, I appreciate that. And of course, big week for you. And the announcement several months ago that your final broadcast as the voice of the Missouri State Bears would come this Saturday. Big day over at Plaster Stadium with the Bears hosting Southern Methodist University, your alma mater. So the clash of Art Hains' wills going at it here this weekend. Bears coming off their first FBS win at Marshall. It should be 17,000 people in the stands. What's going through your mind this week as all this is kind of building up to Saturday's 2:30 kickoff?
Well, I'm really obviously looking forward to the whole thing. The weekend, the build-up. I've got 20 people coming in from out of town and being with them Friday night and after the game. But the game itself, I really hope and expect it to be a spectacle for Springfield. There's never been a football team of this caliber come to Springfield to play a game. Hopefully this is the first of many, but it's going to be hot. It's going to be a hot day, but I hope to see a lot of tailgating, a lot of smoke from the fires, and a lot of enthusiasm in the stadium that day. I know Missouri State Athletics has refurbished the stadium, a lot of new signage, new branding, new field, and hopefully that and some touches in the game with the presentation will help kind of put the cap on it. And then we hope it's a good game.
Well, and you've got a Mad Mustangs team probably coming in after they let one get away against Baylor in overtime. Were you thinking that while you were watching that they're going to be a little more fired up coming in here and try to get things right?
First of all, I was mad they blew the game and thought they had the game won, and of course went the other way. But yeah, this would be an obvious overlooked game for them had they won last week and you next week. But I think we lost that with their loss last week. They're going to want to make amends.
What led you to make the decision? I mean, it's a perfect setup, obviously, with your alma mater taking on the school and teams that you love and have worked for so many decades. What led to the decision that this would be it?
Well, we made the decision a summer ago that would be my last season. But I said, but one more game. And that'll be the home opener with SMU. So everyone agreed to that. And it's just full circle. My first college broadcast on a real radio station was my senior year in college, SMU versus Baylor, 1976 at Moody Coliseum. That was the first basketball game I'd ever done. I had done football and baseball before, but not basketball. But just jumped off the board into the deep end and got through that. And so now my last broadcast will be SMU football against Missouri State.
That's awesome the way that's worked out. And so I kind of want to get in a little bit about, the roots of Art Hains and how this all started, because I mean, most Bears fans know, they just turn on the radio and there's Art, but they don't know how that all came about, many of them. And I guess my question is, how does a kid from Marshall, Missouri decide he wants to go into sports broadcasting? And then how does he wind up in Dallas at SMU?
Well, I loved sports as a kid, as many young boys do and still do, but wasn't very good at it. So I decided the next best thing would be to talk about it. My dad was in the newspaper business, so I kind of had a writing background, but I admired the sportscasters and would listen to each one of them. I knew who was on what network and what sport and what games. And from an early age, really probably sixth grade, that's what I wanted to do, to be a sports play-by-play announcer. So when I was able to get started, excuse me, my senior year of high school, doing color on the high school football broadcasts. And the last game of the year, the play-by-play announcer, who was also the general manager, went to a Missouri Broadcasters convention and left me there to do the game. So I'm 17 years old, did my first play-by-play, and been doing it ever since. The decision to go to SMU was varied. I had relatives in Texas. I'd spent a lot of time in South Texas, Beaumont, Houston, Galveston, in my childhood. I had it was the appeal of warm weather and a big city and big time school for a sports environment. We were Methodists. That played a small role in it. They had a good broadcast journalism school. So I just thought Mizzou was a little bit too big, and ended up settling on SMU.
Was there anybody else in play besides those two, Mizzou and SMU? Did you look at anybody else, or?
Well, looked at Vanderbilt, looked at Missouri Valley there in my hometown. Those were the main ones. But we went on a visit to Vanderbilt in January, and it snowed. And thought, well, that's it. So
Not fighting that anymore, right? So, well, you go to Dallas and go to SMU, and I assume worked in sports information, and did you work for local radio stations down there? How'd you get your start in that market?
I never would have thought of the sports information, but there was a guy in Marshall named John Waldorf, a good friend of my dad's, who was supervisor of Big 8 football officials. And he told my dad, well, if Art wants to get into sports media, he needs to get into sports information wherever he goes to school. But that'll teach him the ins and outs of the business. And so I got that job based on being editor of my high school newspaper and having some clippings from that. And that was I was there more than I was in my room during the time I was at SMU. Got to meet all kinds of sports writers and broadcasters. Vern Lundquist was a fairly young TV anchor on the ABC station in Dallas, and got to know him real well. He was a reference for me when I got the Chiefs gig years later. So Vern and Brad Sham and these guys, and Frank Gleber was the sports director at KRLD. He was a big man at CBS, did the 17th at the Masters right behind Summerall. He was the number 2 NFL guy on CBS on weekends. He was KRLD sports director, and he hired me to do some high school reporting during my time in college. I'd go out on Friday night and cover a high school game, take notes from a notepad, and go to a payphone and call in the report. My senior year, I got to host the show. And then that's how the SMU Baylor game came about, that the Cowboys were going to the Super Bowl that year, 1976-75 season, playing the Steelers in Miami. The same guys did the SMU games as did the Cowboys.
Okay.
His second in command at the station, Al Wisk, called me in Marshall. I'm home at Christmas. He said, Hains, have you ever done basketball? I had not. I said, oh, sure. Love doing basketball. Well, you're doing the SMU Baylor game a week from Saturday. So I hung up and thought, oh, what have I done? 50,000 watt station. I'm going to do my first game.
Yeah.
So I went to Sweet Springs and where I could find a area high school, and kind of sat in the stands with a program and thought to myself what I would say. And then I did the game. So that was how I got that game. As you know, then came back to Marshall for a year and hung out in my parents' basement and wrote for the newspaper and resumed doing the Marshall High and Missouri Valley games. Got the gig in Springfield, but I kept in touch with Frank Gleber. Sent him Christmas cards, called him about once a year, just out of courtesy, really. This job opening came in October of '81. I found out about it from my sports information director, Bob Condren, who was still there. And so I called Gleber, and he hired me over the phone. So that's how I got back to Dallas radio.
And so you came back to Marshall after graduation, then came to Springfield, worked for KGBX back then, correct? And in '76, doing Bears football, basketball, or?
Yeah, football, basketball, occasional baseball.
Okay.
Division II World Series in '78 in Springfield, Illinois.
Okay.
Quick 2 and a barbecue, but we went to Springfield and did those games, but mostly football, basketball with the late, great Vern Hawkins.
Yeah.
Games since 1950. And I inherited him, and we became great friends and broadcast partners for my 4 years, my first stint. We would split it half and half. We each do a half of the play-by-play. And I ended up speaking at his funeral years later. He was kind of a father figure to me.
Was that 76 your first year? Was that the first year of Hammond Center, or is that
the year in Marshall? So 77 football.
Okay.
First year.
Okay.
Year of Hammond Student Center. But that year, the Bears basketball won the MIAA, hosted the regional. We'd beaten Lincoln twice by 1 and 2 points in the regular season, lost to them in the regional finals. We had a player who shall be named later, missed both ends of a 2-shot foul with 5 seconds to go, down 1.
Wow.
By 1, and that was just a punch in the gut. 78 fall, we won the MIAA football title under Rich Johanningmeyer, so had some early success.
Well, and our mutual friend, of course, Wyatt Wheeler, we saw him last night in a little going away thing, but he did an excellent timeline that helped me understand your timeline and where you were and when. Went back to Dallas. In 1985, I saw where you finished second for the Chiefs play-by-play gig to a little old guy named Kevin Harlan, who's done okay, right, at that time. Then how did you wind up back here after that?
Well, when I left, SMS was Division II.
Yeah.
And while I was gone, they moved up to Division I. I got a call from Charlie Spoonhour, who I barely knew. I had just known him when people talked about him when he was a grad assistant in the late 60s. I'd met him a couple times when he came through Springfield. But he called and said that we got something going here on the ground floor. We're going to be good, and we want you to come back, because Vern was retiring.
Okay.
Thing there. Well, in Dallas, I'm always going to be second fiddle to Brad Sham, who's still there. He's the Cowboy to this day. I did have a chance to do Texas A&M had I stayed.
Okay.
We were homesick. We were pregnant with our first child. Wanted to get the boy back close to the grandparents, and we missed Springfield. So I made the decision the day he was born. We're going home, and that was July 20th, 1985.
And then about 10 years later, you went to work for Meyer Communications. And was that the birth of Sports Talk at that time?
It was May 1st, 1995. Tom Ladd and I started at the station on the same day. Now,
Okay.
he's come and gone a couple times, but he's still there under new management. But that was the start of Sports Talk, 27-year run until I got sick in September of 22.
And I did radio with Ned, and ours, was more sports / entertainment, and us fighting. I always respected how, and still to this day do, how you could deliver an opinion and nobody would want to kill you. I spent 20 years, making people mad and in the newspaper / radio part of it. What was always your approach to Sports Talk in terms, just the immense professionalism that you had? And I'm sure that was built up over time in the Dallas market, helping prep you for a live sports talk show like that.
Well, Scott, that's what made you and Ned successful. You're kind of a flamethrower.
But that's one way to put it. There's people that have a different name for that. Starts with an A.
Yeah. But that you play off each other very well.
Thank you.
Gave Ned trouble all the time. But, by nature, I'm a reasonable, logical person. I'm not going to say something outrageous just to get the phone to ring. And that was to my detriment, really, on the show. Sometimes the phone wasn't ringing.
Yeah.
And I just had to filibuster until it did. And I did that show by myself for about 20 years. And if the phone ain't ringing, you got to have something to talk about.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I would have guests, which I really appreciated, each of them. But what I enjoyed most was the interaction with the callers and a chance just to let them have their say, and I'll have my say. Now, if I don't have a strong opinion about something, I'm not going to make one up. But if I do, then I'm going to say it. And if you want to debate about it, that's fine. And there were a couple people who kind of wanted to verbally fight on the air, Bob from Monad being one of them.
with the disconnect, but just as he said, Bob from Monette went off the air. So Bob is still haunting you even in at the end of the career here, right?
Well, Bob was a bitter guy. You know, he loved his Michigan teams where he's from. That's fine, but he hated the Bears, Mizzou, the Chiefs, the Royals, the Cardinals.
Life.
Hated every life pretty much. So he was annoying. I had another one who called me a communist because I advocated revenue sharing for baseball as a cure to parity in the game, and he thought, well, the right makes might, and the richer the better. So we had an argument about that, and that was. But by and large, I could calm people down by logic, and that's kind of been that's kind of how I am. My son's the same way.
Yeah. Well, and just I think fans still to this day admire the way you handled callers like Marilyn and Alan from Mountain Home. I mean, you treated them with professionalism, with respect, even though, there'd be some people that might be driving through and it would annoy the heck out of them that these people were on a live radio show. That didn't matter to you. You were going to treat them like human beings. And I think that's kind of symbolic of the way you were for the entire career. I mean, with those two in particular, did you go, hey, Alan's on the line. We're going to talk some hogs and everything else here, right?
Well, when it was Lady Bears, I'm not talking enough about them. Yeah. And so that's why I'm happy to talk about the Lady Bears. With Alan, I mean, I looked forward to his calls, not at first, but then later on, I mean, he became a part of the show. And to this day, people come up to me and say that's what they remember most. And it was Alan's phone calls and our interaction. I mean, he would, he was, I don't know what his disorder was, but he had no filter.
Yeah.
And Ray Moose Meyer is traumatized to this day. I'd plug the upcoming things on the station. We were carrying Drury at the time. And I'd say, well, tonight after the show, Drury Panthers play Rockhurst right here on the Jock. And he called in and said, who's doing that game? I said, that's Ray Moose Meyer. Never heard of him. Every time I see a moose, never heard of it.
Never heard of him. Well, hey, we lost your video. I'm going to pause just for a quick second if we can see if we can get that back. Okay. How did the Chiefs pregame, postgame, halftime show host thing come about? That was in 2008, I believe.
Right.
Yeah.
So Mitch Holtis was a every other Wednesday guest during Chiefs season on Sports Talk. He had someone there in Kansas City who arranged those hits with stations all around what he calls Chiefs Kingdom. And though we didn't carry the Chiefs, we did, but through a managerial snafu in Springfield, we lost them. But he knew that was the only sports talk show in town in that afternoon drive. So he got to doing that. His people reached out to us for that. So over time, he got to know that I was a passionate Chiefs follower and had been a fan all my life. And then also during those years, he did a lot of Missouri Valley Conference basketball on TV. So I'd see him whenever we'd do a game in Missouri Valley Conference tournament. So he told me for a couple of years, I want to find a way to get you involved in our broadcast. And I couldn't imagine what he meant. And then in 2008, they decided to make a change in the broadcast. And he approached me then about this role. And I said, well, that would be fantastic. Well, the general manager at the station in Kansas City was Donna Baker, who's from Springfield.
Yeah.
And I knew her. And she had been in Lincoln, Nebraska before Kansas City and had plans to bring in a guy from there. But Mitch convinced her that I would be the guy. So it was a little bit of a hoop to jump through because they had agreed to hire me, and that was that. But Carl Peterson thought he was ruler of all. Now, he had no say over the pregame host. He did over the on-air play-by-play, but he needed to be humored. So that's when Mitch said, get people to write letters. So I got Vern Lundquist to write. I got Brad Sham to write. I got Bill Rowe to write. Rob Fulp, a good friend of mine, got Governor Matt Blunt to write.
Wow.
And so Carl said, Uncle, okay, but I had to go up one day and pass a test. So I went up there one morning and in his inner sanctum, the Holy of Holies on the 50-yard line at Arrowhead. And we talked for about an hour. And he realized then that I knew what I was talking about. So I had lunch and he sent me on my way. And I got to his blessing. And on opening Royals Day 2008, early April, I signed my contract with Donna at Coach's, which is now closed because of flooding at 103rd Street, on my way to Royal Stadium, and signed that contract. It was snowing that day, and we were tailgating in the snow, and I couldn't have been happier.
And then, of course, the Chiefs a few years later draft a guy named Patrick Mahomes, and you got a pretty magical ride there for several years. And did you get a ring or two out of that too?
I got one, the second Super Bowl ring. I did get that.
That's awesome.
We had a couple of 2 and 14s in there before we got the rings.
Yeah. There were some tough times as well there. So, when you look back and of course, juggling both those, you were a busy guy doing both, but you were living your dream out there. When you look back on the Missouri State days, what are going to be your fondest games, memories? And I'm sure it's going to include spoonball and the College World Series with Keith Gutton and things like that. Am I right?
Sure. Well, football, the playoff teams of 89 and 90 with Jess Branch, who's going to be at the game Saturday.
Awesome.
On at halftime as my guest. But beating Maine in overtime, not overtime, but on the last play of the game in 89 in the playoffs. And then the resurgence with Bobby Petrino just overnight.
Yeah.
I said in an article, it's like the Scrooge and the Christmas Carol. The Spirits did it all in one night. Went from 1-10 to playoffs and conference champs in 1 year. So that's been gratifying. Basketball, the Spoon days, the victory at BYU that really kind of set everything up. Winston Garland scored 5 points in the last 5 seconds to tie it, won it in overtime. The going to the Sweet 16 in 1999 against Duke. So many, and the best moment of all was beating Wichita State in 2011. That was the best.
Yeah. Last
day of the season, national big ESPN, confetti coming down from the rafters, goosebumps even now just talking about it. That was my favorite basketball. Baseball, there have been so many. Matt Sapicki's 2-out, 2-strike homer at Arkansas in 99 that sent the game with Arkansas into extra innings. That didn't win it, that sent it into extra innings, and the Bears won it in the 10th. Again at Arkansas in 2017 when Jeremy Ironman hit a walk-off to beat Oklahoma State. And then, of course, we played the ridiculous monsoon game with Arkansas in which it was raining, just pouring buckets. And Dave Van Horn ran over Gene McCarter from Mizzou, who was the site commissioner. We played in the monsoon and lost, got over at 3 a.m., came back the next day and beat their ass and won the Super Regional. So those, and the College World Series, of course.
Yeah.
In 2003, we go win the regional in Nebraska, go to Ohio State, sweep them, really 2 not very close games. And after the Sunday game where we clinched it, the Varsity Club is a old venerable place on the Ohio State campus. We were staying at a hotel that the Ohio State Hospitality Restaurant Administration students administer, and it was great. So my son and I wandered into the Varsity Club at about 10:30 on Sunday night. They were getting ready to close. And I said, you might want to stay open. There'll be about 50 people come in here in 10 minutes. They said, oh, no, there won't. Well, there were. And we kept the place open till about 1 a.m. And Keith Gutton, who doesn't drink, had a beer. And that was a wonderful night.
He probably had a beer and a pizza with no cheese on it, right? I know that.
Undoubtedly did.
Yeah. Just living your best life. And of course, the illness in 2022 after you covered the Bears game at Arkansas, had all of us on the edge of our seats for weeks and months, because it was so touch and go and trying to figure out what was wrong and a diagnosis of West Nile virus, that whole period of your life. The thing that's always amazed me, and like my wife and I were talking about it last night in the car, is your attitude toward all this. I know I'd be mad at the world, but then I got to thinking, what would Art say? And Art would say, well, what choice did I have? And you look back on it now and just an amazing, getting back to be able to do these games and things like that when we didn't even know if you were going to be here. What was your driving force? Because I know there were just thousands of fans and friends and emails and letters to hang in there and fight through this. Kind of talk about mentally what that whole period was like and where you are today with it.
Well, first I was just trying to live. I don't remember the first couple of weeks, and then kind of gradually got my memory back, but it took a while cognitively. But the physical part was obviously the key. Got so many, as you say, cards and letters from people I don't know, from church groups all around Southwest Missouri. It meant the world. All those prayers meant a lot, and I think got me through it. But I've never have thought, why me? Why not me? It just happened to be me. It was a wild, random thing. I don't remember getting bit by a mosquito. I must have been out mowing. I would tend to do that sometimes in the early evening when it got a little cooler. And I've since found out that's when mosquitoes love to feast, and they feast on sweat. So that's probably how it happened. But no, I had so much support. People that came up to Lincoln, Nebraska, including Wyatt twice, and Coach Rowe and Mark Fisher, and all various people that came up there to visit. That meant the world. So I was, first of all, I thought I was going to walk again, and that hadn't happened. But I was determined to get well enough to get back to Springfield. The first place I went in Lincoln was very negative. They wanted to cut their losses. They thought I was going to die. They didn't want me on their record. They pretty much kicked me out. So I went down the street in Lincoln, Nebraska to another place. Who would have thought, in Lincoln, Nebraska? And they were wonderful. They were supportive and positive from the start. The Ambassador is its name. And I really enjoyed my 5 months there, if you can enjoy that situation. They got me well enough to come back home to Springfield Health and Rehab. And I really did enjoy the year there. Got daily therapy, got 3 meals a day. I still go out there and visit occasionally. So the Lord has had a hand in all of these, everything in my life. But the fateful phone call, really, that our son made when I was in dire straits, and Cox Medical Center is a great place, but they didn't know what to do with this rare disease. They said I need to get either to KU Med Center or Barnes. KU was closed. It was full. It was full, not closed, but it was full. So Chris picked up the phone and called Dan Israel with the Chiefs radio network and said, do you think the Chiefs can get him into KU? So Dan called the Chiefs doctor, Mike Monaco, and said, if we had a player that needed to get into KU tonight, could you get him in? He said, well, sure. He said, well, we have a team member that needs to get in. Wow. So Dr. Monaco got me into KU. They got me stabilized enough to get me to Lincoln and then back home to Springfield. And once I got back to Springfield, I was going back on the air.
That, and at Springfield Rehab, you became, I would imagine, quite a celebrity there in the rehab center. Didn't they kind of turn your room into basically a studio and as part of the comeback?
On Chiefs game days, they did. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you make some good friends there that became new Chiefs fans and Art Hains fans?
I think they were already Chiefs fans, but it was amazing when the Chiefs would score a touchdown, you could hear cheers all up and down the hall as everybody watching the Chiefs game.
That's awesome.
Yeah, my daughter would be there and set up the equipment and hand me the sponsor reads. And, I couldn't have done these last 2 years without her. She was with me throughout all the broadcasts, and even as importantly, through all the prep during the week. We'd listen to the audio that came from the daily press conferences, pick out what we wanted to use on pregame, and that was a tedious process. And then I would write out the scripts for the pregame. There were about 4 segments, and I would talk and she would transcribe, and we would do that. And so we did that first year in Springfield Rehab, and then this last year I was fortunate enough to get to our new home and broadcast from here.
That's awesome. What were the the challenges that you've made so much progress in from a broadcasting sense when you first started back in? I know, when we had you on early on, your voice, you had to build strength back up in your voice. What were some of the other things that you figured out a way now to do it and just sound like Art Hains on the air?
Well, it's kind of like riding a bike in terms of the execution of the games. The thing that is more difficult for me now, I admit, is the recognition. Is kind of the vision, the field of vision. Uh, I can't see the right corner of the end zone on my near side. I couldn't see the right field corner at all for baseball, except of course, they had us in a weird place this last year because of renovation.
Yeah.
But I finally figured it out late in the season. I could actually go out into the seated area, not fall over the stairs, but just far enough that I could see the whole field, and that worked out better. Same thing, basketball. Both corners, left, right, couldn't see it. I just have to guess. I'd say shot up from three, and then either yes or off the mark, and then when they backpedal, I'd say who shot it.
Yeah.
So those little things that I've had to compensate for, and not been able to write real legibly. I mean, I can if I've got the right angle to the paper and such as that, but to do it quickly, that has been a challenge. That you got computer screens and all to help you with that. So there are some logistical things right now that are making it more difficult for me to do the games. So we thought this was a good time to end it.
Where are you in your rehab process now? What do you work on? What are we doing?
Well, I've been through several rounds of both home and in facility rehab. Right now, we're just maintaining. My caregivers are doing some leg and arm exercises with me, just kind of to keep things flowing.
Okay. What are you going to do in your newfound spare time?
Well, I mean, pretty much what I'm doing now, and that's go out to dinner, go to social events, go to plays, go to games. I'll be at all the Bears games. I bought football season, and so after in them with my daughter usually most weeks, and basketball and baseball too. So I'll enjoy going to those games. I always try to get to at least one Evangel and Drury game a year in basketball, and I'll continue doing that. And now Chiefs is a little bit weird. I'm glad to not have the work to do during the week. Game day I kind of miss, but now I can go back to being a fan like I was before 2008, because it kind of detracted from my fandom a little bit, because I'm happy the Chiefs win, whatever, but I'm doing a job. They score a touchdown. Okay, we're going to write this right now during the timeout. So you couldn't really lose track of that, but now I can just be a fan.
That's awesome. Hey, Art, I lost you on video again. I'm going to pause just for a second. We'll bring you back in, okay? Having all kinds of technical difficulties. So, Art, I think we're going to wrap this up, and I know we'll see you around at games because that's what you do. I know it's not easy for you to get there. You've had a lot of help, I think, the last couple of years, and anything you want to say to those people or the listeners, Bears fans, over the course of your career?
Well, first of all, I worked at Meyer Communications, so I'm used to technical issues. But I haven't.
Apologies for the technical difficulties there. We just had trouble with the signal with Art, and the stuff is so good that I just want to make sure we get this out there, and who knew, as soon as he said I worked at Meyer Communications, so I was used to technical issues, that the final one would come there. So kind of fitting in it that way. But I know Art was in the process of saying thank you to all his listeners and fans and the people that employed him, and the people that kept his spirits up during this battle. And I'll just say, this is a guy that I admire more than perhaps anybody in the Springfield market. I came in and to school at SMS in the early 80s, met Art later on in the late 80s, and been nothing but a professional and a help to me and other young journalists that have come along. And you just look at the relationship that he formed with Wyatt Wheeler and helped him guide him along the path too. So if there's a Mount Rushmore of Springfield media, Art Hains and Ned Reynolds are the first two that have to go up there, and just appreciate everything he's done. Want to say thanks to our sponsors, the Pitch Pizza and Pub, located off East Sunshine in Springfield, there in the Southern Hills Shopping Center. Your home for great pizzas, calzones, appetizers, lunch or dinner. They've got frosty cold beverages. Had some friends that went and watched football there, said it was amazing atmosphere. And if you need meeting space, give Brian Bevel and his folks a call. They've got plenty of places to put you for those networking events or parties, whatever you have coming up. And then Thompson Sales. I know the Thompson boys have been longtime great friends of Art, and I know he's like me. He's bought several vehicles from the folks there, the late George Thompson, Lynn, Miles, and Tyler, and the family that's carrying on the tradition today. They're at 1555 East Independence, been open since 1919. You're home for Cadillac, GMC, and Buick cars and trucks. Great service center to keep you on the road and keep you ready for the next trade-in. They are Thompson Sales. We appreciate their sponsorship. Again, thanks to Art Hains for his time today. Wish him the best on his final broadcast on Saturday. Thank you for your patience in getting through our technical issues. We're going to wrap it up and say we'll see you next week on Around the Ozarks Sports Scene.